We'll call to order at 6:02. We have our minutes if you're here today. And we have Kylie, Brad, and Meredith online. I'll open the floor for public comment, but I don't see any currently. So without any public present, I'll move on then down to the first action item, which is to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Mike,
I'll second.
and Kristen. All those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Next, we have the need for an executive session, and the first action item we need is to determine that premature general public knowledge would clearly place us at a disadvantage. And the executive session is evaluation of a public officer or employee. So can I get a motion for the first action, please, to determine premature general public knowledge?
So moved.
Melissa,
Second.
Justin? All those in favor of determining that premature general public knowledge would put us at a disadvantage, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Yes. Abstentions. Okay. Can I please have an action to enter executive session under T1 VSA 313A3? Evaluation of a public officer or employee, and we'll be inviting in Katrina, Patrick, and Shannon.
Move.
Justin,
I'll second.
Kristen? All those in favor of entering executive session at 6:04, please say aye.
Aye.
Any- We'll assign those of you on Zoom to a breakout room and I'll join. If we put this sign up, we might be able to stay here, actually. Is that too risky for people or?
There's play practice on, so if they're busy, that's the only thing that's occurring.
Wait, do you mind being our sentry at the door? With enthusiasm.
Watch it.
I guess.
Tell us where to sit, that's all we do.
You can just join the table. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we have seats at the table. Perfect.
Yeah, we'll.
Although, yeah.
So, I've been checking out.
But I sense.
Get this somehow. Beth, so how do we make it so we stay here and that camera's on?
Can we move that to a breakout room?
Might just be easier
Yeah.
to do our usual way
All
that we
right.
know works.
Campfire? Campfire and.
Ready, ruin is fine.
Don't tell boy.
He's probably already in the. There's going to be flying monkeys, so he is, you know.
He's always.
Brad, Kylie, and Meredith are the only three online, right?
We have some work to do first.
Oh, wait.
And Vicky.
I didn't know. Better
about that, so it must be
It's Jennifer.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I was like Jennifer Miller.
Sorry.
It's okay.
That's the worst thing that happens to me. Come along.
Alright, there's that. You should just have a message to join.
Oh, Herb is here now too.
Okay. Herb, we're going into a executive session, so I'm gonna invite you into a breakout room.
Okay. Back out of executive.
We're doing that.
There we go. So we have Vicky to set up.
Sorry. Oh, that was that.
Floyd left me hanging out.
Oh, no. I had to stay and guard the door, and then I find out, okay, they're going into the other room, and then I was afraid to leave, because somebody would come in.
Vicky.
We would come looking for you eventually.
Since you parking lot. Okay. All right, good. So we're out of executive at 6:39 and we'll move to the consent agenda. And if you have a motion to approve, please.
So moved.
Melissa?
I'll second.
Kristen seconds. Any discussion?
But this is where I can ask questions about one of the items.
Yeah.
Oh, Patrick, can you just they don't know all of the positions that the resignations hold, so can you just tell us what positions they're vacating?
Yep, so our teacher, which is not for next year, but the year after, if you notice that little, it's an
did.
unusual thing.
Yeah.
And then we have social studies here at Mount Aid, math here at Mount Aid. And systems and math coach here at Mount Aid.
Are any of the hiring in C to backfill these resignations or not?
No,
No, okay, so they're ones that are,
yeah, no.
thank you.
Any other discussion about the consent agenda? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
That just asked for. Okay. All right, move down then to the executive limitations monitoring. So first is an action to approve monitor report 2.1 treatment current of prospective students and parents and guardians. Can I get a motion to approve these? Justin? A second. Sarah, second. Discussion?
I think the one comment that came up for me when I was reading through this, again, we continue to use Monk and Central Family Handbook, which leads me to think the others aren't where we want them to be. We've used that one a couple of times, so I'd like us to look at the others to make sure those are also up to par and use those as examples. I think would be helpful so that we can feel confident all the schools are where they need to be.
We did endeavor to add some additional like cover pages from different schools. I haven't looked at this in a little bit to see which appendices we did that for. But we noted that from last year and tried to work on that. But we'll work to improve it again for next time.
Any other comments about this report? Hearing none, can I ask our questions? Okay, based upon the information provided, does the board find that the superintendent's interpretation is reasonable, yes or no? Yes. Yes. Does the data demonstrate accomplishment of this interpretation, yes or no?
Yes.
All those in favor of approving monitoring report 2.1, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Did you have another comment, Brad?
No, I was just saying, I approve.
Any opposed? Abstentions, okay. Motion passes.
And I'm just noting appendix B has multiple kind of tables of contents from multiple schools to try and reflect that comment from last year. But we can look to do that in other places as well.
All right, next is the financial report update. Any comments about that? None? How about the superintendent report? Yeah.
Especially the pictures, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. We'll move down then to the board management and governance section. So first we have an action to approve monitoring report 4.6 board committee structure. Can I get a motion, please? So moved. Barb,
Second.
Lisa? Discussion? Liz isn't here tonight, but she did say that if there were any comments that she needed to make adjustments, she was open to that, but.
Is this something, I guess my comment is this something that we would change in the policy and governance
Yeah,
to see?
so we did, she did mention that too, that there might be changes in that as well, and it's possible, yeah. So if we do change it, any further monitoring reports would be adjusted. Any other comments? We're good to go. All right, based upon the information provided, does the board find that the board's interpretation is reasonable? Yes or no? Yes.
Yes,
The data demonstrates accomplishment of this interpretation, yes or no? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor of approving monitoring report 4.6, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes. And then next we have the monitoring report 4.5, board member code of conduct. Now please have an action. A motion.
I'll move.
Justin?
Second.
Barb? Discussion? Yeah, go ahead, Herb.
Yeah, so I just wanted to state the obvious that obviously I'm a legislator for three of the towns in our district. And there are a lot of other legislators who are also school board members. And I just wanted to let the folks, the board know that the way, I handle that is to make sure scrupulously, never, ever, ever say, anything about representing the board. I have my own responsibilities as a legislator, but I'm pretty scrupulous about keeping. I'm happy to be on the board. I'm hoping I can contribute, but I also keep those roles very separate.
Thanks, Herb. Any other comments about this monitoring report? Okay. Based upon the. Based upon the information provided, does the board find that the board's interpretation is reasonable? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
yes,
The data demonstrates accomplishment of this interpretation, yes or no? Yes. All those in favor of approving monitoring report 4.5, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Motion passes. All right. Next, we have an action item to authorize the chair and superintendent to accept IDEA grant funds. Get a motion, please.
So
Mike? I'll second. Kristen? And then any discussion?
So these are special education related funds. And they cover a whole range of services, supports and supplies, et cetera.
How much are we accepting?
The figure on the top of my head. Floyd or Beth, do you have a sense of what idea B is?
No, not off the top of my head. We haven't gotten next year's either. But no, I don't. It's
It's substantial.
fine. Yeah. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't even want to say it.
Yeah.
I can find out.
Is the ballpark figure that
Yeah.
was coming up in my head, but we'll get a more specific amount.
Ballpark's fine.
Yeah.
Well, 350,000, what's another 6? Preschool would be another 6 on that.
Is that pretty much the
So-
rate, you know, less or more than other years?
So this is now a block grant. It's based on enrollment, and prior year spending, so there's sort of a formula that's used. It's probably similar to last year, though I suspect maybe decreasing slightly.
Don't have next year's.
Yeah, we don't
right,
we
that-
don't have next year's. It's pretty similar to last one year before though. But we don't have next year's yet. That's coming in June.
And these are federal funds, so there's all those federal fund questions that are floating out there. These ones feel more protected than others, yeah. I think, yeah, Medicaid is the one that I'm most concerned about right now. This one, I actually think I've seen language that says specifically that this is safe for next year. Year after, very different conversation, but I think this is safe money for next year.
You'll see in my superintendent's report coming the next round, I'll talk a little bit about Title 1, 2, and 4, which also are federal funded. That right now, we've been given 80% of this current year's allocation, hoping that we'll get more later. And I've explained that in my superintendent's report because it's a little more confusing than just a short bit. So that's kind of where we are right now. We think we're gonna get all of our funding, but there's always a holding pattern.
So. All those in favor of authorizing the chair and superintendent to accept those funds? You say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions, okay. Next is an action item to authorize the chair to sign the tax anticipation note. Can I get a motion, please?
So
Melissa first,
I'll
Kristen second. Discussion?
So at the annual meeting every year, we get authority from the community to borrow money in anticipation of tax revenue coming in. This is sort of the second step in that you're authorizing the chair to sign off on doing so. And Floyd can talk a little bit about how that works, and there's actually a revenue created from the revenue.
So based on our cash flow structure, we can borrow up to 7 million. We're going out 6. Well, this year that we're in, think of it as a line of credit that we pay an interest on, but if we don't spend down out of the line, we can invest it and arbitrage it. And if you look at our financial statements, we've made $336,000 this year on that fund. And we have not tapped into it at all. We're in a pretty good cash position coming out of ESSER, doing some wise things in there to hold on to cash. That's created the ability to not have to tap into it. Having said that, for $336,000 net, why would we not continue? And should something happen with the feds, we're in a position to protect our cash flow simply and easily with just an account transfer.
People appreciate payroll happening and contractors getting their bills paid. Let's make sure that we can do that.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of authorizing the chair to sign the tax anticipation note, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Abstentions, okay. For E, we have the action item to adopt the non-union support staff agreement. Can I get a motion, please? So moved. Sarah first,
Second.
Melissa second, discussion?
So a little context here. So we have two negotiated agreements, one for licensed professionals in the district and one for union support staff in the district. We then have sort of a number of kind of one-off contracts for building principals and various directors of sorts. And then there's sort of another group of support staff that are not unionized that fit under this non-union support staff agreement that used to be known as the Board of Directors policy. Steve Rooney, a few years ago, led a sort of effort to remove this from a policy that really isn't a policy. And so we renamed it the non-union support staff agreement. And there's some, I think the intent was for this to, being that it isn't a policy, to not be something that has to necessarily come before the board. But that's still being necessarily I think determined at the policy and governance level to just confirm what action actually did happen or didn't happen, needs to happen for that to be official. So this could be the last time this comes before this board, or maybe decided that no, this should come annually, but there'll be more of a concrete decision this time next year when it's time to do this again. But in talking with Aaron, it felt like for this year, because of the uncertainty, let's bring it back before you all and get that sort of official stamp while we figure it out. For the most part, this tends to mirror the settlement with the union support staff in terms of new monies. Much like we do with professional staff that are not covered by the union union agreement. So very parallel structures. There are sometimes, because of the flexibility and the timing of it, that we may find that there's language that we can improve in here that then becomes a model that we lean on for the next round of negotiations with support staff. So there's a little bit of sort of give and take with these two agreements as we work to get them aligned with language that offers the most protection for both employee and the district. And so some of the changes you see here are an attempt to either mirror what was just negotiated last year with the support staff, or to sort of be the leading language for the next agreement.
Or was your question answered? Oh, okay, yep. You're on mute.
There we go, that's better. I didn't quite catch the intro to that. Did I?
About what it
Did I
is.
understand that the non-union support staff agreement would not be coming before the board in the future? And I was curious about the rationale for that.
I think that's part of the conversation. There's been no decision definitive on that. That's the work that policy and governance will lead. And ultimately will come before the board for action. Like that was the part. My recollection was that was a decision that was made, but there was no evidence that I could find in any action taken by a board. So in the absence of evidence that action was officially taken, the conversation continues, and at some point there'll be a decision made to either keep it coming to the board or not have it continue to come to the board.
There was a lot of work done on it to change the title of the document from a board of directors policy to it's more of a procedure type document now. So that's the difference. If it was a policy, then it would come before us. We would approve it and monitor it each year versus a procedure which we can delegate to Patrick to oversee to make sure that all the language is up to date and everyone who is supposed to be in that document is, and people who aren't supposed to be aren't. So that's where we're hung up, is just making sure that switch, that title switch also came with the delegation switch, which we can't find evidence of quite yet. So that's in policy and governance. So if it is that it's a procedural document now, we won't have to do any further actions on it. But if it does remain a procedure or a policy, I mean, then we would.
Yeah, I'll just have, yeah, obviously I gotta get caught up here. I'm struggling a little bit why the non-union agreement would come before us. Why the union agreement would come before us and not the non-union. Thank you.
Sure.
Right, so just to offer, I think the difference here is the difference between policy and ratification. Right, so the board needs to ratify the unionized agreements, right, but that's not policy either. So if this isn't a policy and you don't need to ratify it, what is it?
Yeah.
That therein lies the question for the policy and governance committee.
We'll get more to you, Herb. Okay. Any other questions about that? Okay. All those in favor of adopting the non-union support staff agreement, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, passes. For F, we have the action to approve the sabbatical leave process, so can I please have a motion?
So moved.
Barb? First,
Second.
Mike second. For discussion, I took all of the comments you all had given me the last time I presented this to you and just integrated them into the document, so that included entering a date of an intended presentation of learning, which is where the teacher would come back and tell us what they've learned and tell us how they're gonna integrate that into other learning opportunities. And I added that to the sabbatical request review form as well. And we also added the caveat of the acceptance of this application relies on a passing school budget, which is another note you all have had. Open to thoughts, suggestions, comments, and I will clean it up before it's posted or put anywhere so that all of my notes aren't in there.
So like, is page one gonna be in there? Or is that the piece where you're like, the red font stuff you'll take out?
Yeah, so that was me just putting all of the document together so everyone could see what I was referencing, but yeah, no, that will be in its own place, and I think this document will probably live somewhere else.
And that first one comes from the contract.
Yes,
That's the definitions in the
Yes.
negotiated agreement.
Got it.
So it doesn't actually have to be part of this.
Correct.
But that's
Understood.
part of the
Okay,
contract
thank
itself.
you.
Yep.
Where would a teacher find this? Just anything?
yeah, so that's the next question about where to put it,
Cause I missed the date, one of, we were presented with something, right?
it's in the contract, right? So
Okay.
the date of when this is due is in the contract, but where to find the application will be the next thing, so either.
We have a staff resources section on the website. That might be a good place, and we'll just have to somehow
Make sure it's
alert folks that that's where they can find it.
Okay.
And, and that can be a place where it would be common for someone to reach out to me, say, hey, I'm interested in a sabbatical, what's the process? And I can point them to that resource on that website.
I think that's really great, Aaron. So thanks again for all the work you're doing here. And I'm sorry if I missed this before. The only area that I'm maybe a little hesitant on is in the sort of checklist on the first part. With the, I hereby apply for sabbatical and then choose an item below. And I could be off in terms of what the rest of the board is thinking, so feel free to ignore this if that's where we end up. It wasn't my sense that, work on a master's degree or maybe even a doctorate would be kind of a sufficient reason for a sabbatical. That feels to me incongruous with the contract language in terms of giving credit, paying for credits each year, certain numbers. It seems like it would be a strange position where many or most of our professional staff are pursuing these advanced degrees sort of simultaneously, taking advantage of that program through the credits that the district pays for. And then to have another individual who is then being paid full-time to go to school while being paid to get those credits as well. We could be wrong, maybe that is something that we absolutely want to support. But I'm not sure if that's the bar that anyone can say, I want to go get a master's. And we say, yes, that's a valid reason, we're gonna pay you not just the credits anymore, but your salary to do so. I don't know how anybody would sit there and say, well, I'm gonna try to do this while teaching, excuse me. So I'm not really sure if that's the intent. If it is our intent to open up that as a new avenue to pursue higher education, by all means, let's keep this. But if not, I think having the sort of more narrative statement of purpose and really viewing a paid sabbatical as being a really unique opportunity to advance their growth. Further education could certainly be a part of that, but it feels like that's a weird bar to set. You know, unless I've misread this.
No, I don't actually disagree with you, because I think we could potentially like open it up to more people. Taking it your option to with master sort of thing, not that it's easy to do it while working, but.
A number of people pursuing a master's at any one time can be fairly significant. And if they had the option to take either a half year off with full pay or a full year off with half pay, there could be a fair number of people that do that, which could have financial implications because we're paying a sub and paying the person and paying for the credits. But it could also have coverage implications because of the lack of folks that would be available to step in for that long term.
I don't know if I missed something, but is there a cap on how many people can get sabbatical in a year?
Nothing written. I mean, the language is absent, which gives the board a lot of flexibility in how many you approve or if you approve and what you approve. So you have quite a lot of latitude, but by definition, sabbatical in the contract is either a half year with full pay or a full year with half pay. So that piece,
Right.
if you say yes, that's part of what you're saying yes to. Not that there might not be other ways to say, we'll approve this if we can have agreement that there's this alternative to how sabbatical is currently defined in the contract. That would need to be codified in a side letter or done differently in the next agreement.
So what happens, like devil's advocate, if you have great reasons from 10 candidates, but you can't afford it, you can't afford 10? What do you do?
I think the board has latitude to decide whether it's a lottery or you give preference over something that you think is gonna have more of a return on the investment. Or say no to everybody because you can't afford everyone. Like, I think you have complete latitude.
So just leaving it open to create the rules at the time?
And I think that flexibility serves everybody well, because then the board's in a position to respond in a way that makes sense, given what you have for information in front of you, whether it's 10 people or one person. And the financial conditions and all that goes into whether or not a sabbatical being approved makes sense. And that flexibility serves the employee well, because you're in a position to do something with that flexibility that can meet the requests and can meet the board's needs.
And I guess to be clear, I guess I'm not opposed to considering a proposal where further education is part of it. I'm just a little hesitant to expressly call for, you know, completing a master's, given, I don't know if there's a dozen or 20 year currently pursuing that. I think it might dilute the process in such a way that we run into what Barb was sort of bringing up of like, how would we possibly decide amongst all of those? And how would you then look at the employees and say like, yes, this master's is worth it, we're gonna pay that person to do it, and the rest of all you have to somehow juggle that. Like, it feels like we open up a strange inequity in some ways. Whereas if we really signal, like, come to us with these proposals and really wow us with like, this is a really unique way that you can bring something back to the district and to yourself. Like, I think that's probably more in the spirit of what I imagine are gonna be relatively limited approvals, at least given the current budgetary constraints, right? Like, how many of these in a given year can we easily approve? I like to be able to prove them. That's the point of having this process a little bit more like of a process, because we'll have a basis to do so. But I think we want to be pretty clear in the form itself about the sort of exceptional nature of these kinds of requests and opportunities.
And for whatever the context is worth, with the language as it stands now, there've been 2 sabbatical requests in the 9 years that I've been here, so there haven't been.
Okay.
The application, wow us.
So the short of that, Aaron, would be, I would just get rid of that whole
Yep.
item, because we're already asking them what they want to do
Yep.
on their sabbatical in a much more narrative form below. So that would be the easy fix from my perspective, if, of course, the board is so inclined.
People good with that? Good. Yes, put a thumb up if you're okay with striking that stuff out and. Perfect, okay.
Would there be any, sorry, I'm jumping in, would there be any advantage to much the same as how we approve or determine early retirement so that it can become a budget item included? Would there be any advantage to having that piece from a board standpoint to have how much they want in the following fiscal year to allocate towards this so that it can be vetted and budgeted, as opposed to just a decision made not on the fly, but without that clear, and there are advantages either way, but just from a.
I think that's the intent behind the November 1st deadline, is so that
can
we
get
know
it.
there's a request on the table or 10 requests on the table while we're building the budget, well in advance of the January deadline date.
Is that perfect? If we're using it in that way as a support to that, great.
I think so, and I think we want to keep it removed from the application, because, you know, you don't want people to have to disclose salary, for example. So we'll be able to access like what a year full salary would cost, knowing who the individual is, like you have that information.
Yeah.
But having them have to report that starts to feel uncomfortable from my perspective.
And even just working from an average compensation perspective,
Exactly.
gets you in the ballpark.
I think having the application relying on passing school budget also helps with that protection of. If we're as a community saying we don't, this isn't how we're allocating that, then that's a pretty clear indicator to us to be careful.
I also think when we have our newly articulated strategic plan to choose applications that will be directly correlated with our district goals will be very helpful. So when you have 10 applications, where, to Patrick's point, what's the return on investment as it aligns with some of the things that we're working on as a district?
I had one little thought, sorry. Should be, just when you were talking about passing the school budget, I wonder, and I hate to be thinking kind of legalese, but I wonder if we need to be a little bit more specific there, because presumably a school budget will ultimately pass. But
Oh, like on the first try.
I think we might want to say on the first try, because I think what we need to have is the flexibility to budget for an approved sabbatical in the first budget. And then if that fails, we have to have the flexibility.
Yeah.
Not that that would be the first place to go, but
Yeah.
we have to have the flexibility to
Yeah.
then be able to say, I'm so sorry, we want this to work. But the community isn't approving this, and this is an area where we think we can get to a budget that gets there. So maybe it is just saying, relies on passing the first budget and, you know, consideration, like, I don't know how you wordsmith that, but I think we need to give ourselves a formal out.
Yeah.
Cause I'd hate to be in a position where they say like, well, you passed it on the 4th time,
Yeah,
Right.
you owe me this.
yeah.
And we don't have the budget for it.
And I think that's consistent with the deadline for the board to act. So March 15th is what it says in the contract, and that allows you'll then know, it won't be certified, but you'll know, did the town meeting day vote pass or not?
Right.
Okay, so it may be.
It's consistent in the spirit of
Okay,
the.
okay.
Yeah, that's not a bad suggestion.
Mhm.
Okay. Any other thoughts about that? I'm happy to do all that and put it in June. Okay, so. Who made the motion for? Did I?
Oh, I'm sorry, Barb.
Barb.
Like, now.
So we're not going to approve it as it stands right now. Or we can
We approve it
make a
with the
friendly amendment by
proposed
saying
changes.
approve with listed changes.
I'd be perfectly comfortable doing that. I'd say that this will end up exactly, right, so.
Are people comfortable with a friendly amendment
Mm-hmm.
route? Okay.
So Barbara, are you comfortable making the friendly amendment to your motion?
Maybe. I would like to, I'm not
Okay.
quite sure how.
Well, I'll list out what we had for changes, and then your motion could just be a friendly amendment to approve the sabbatical leave process as amended.
Okay.
And I'll-
easier if you just didn't pass this one and do it in the motion.
So don't approve and then, make a motion to approve the amended.
To approve the sabbatical leave process with
As
the
amended,
discussed, with the amendments discussed. That would be easier than having.
okay,
Or wait till June. And,
We have the motion hanging out there, so you have.
but that's what I mean,
Vote it down
if you
and
vote
then
it down
bring it
now
back.
and then
Right,
make
yeah.
a motion in
Then
June
bring
with
it
the.
Yeah, okay, why don't we just do that? So just don't vote to approve. Okay, all right, all those in favor of approving the sabbatical leave process, please say aye. Good job. Any opposed? Yes. Okay, any abstentions? Great, it does not pass. Okay.
Good job there.
Yeah, it's terrible.
We were on a roll, to be honest.
Yeah. We were, look at all my check marks. Oh, all right. The next
Sorry.
is an action to assign the monitoring report for policy 4.8, which is the ownership linkage plan for the June meeting. Can I please get a motion? Melissa, and then Sarah seconds. Okay. I know in my notes, Meredith and Herb, you're the only two board members who currently have not written one for this year. The ownership linkage plan fits really beautifully into community engagement. It's pretty much what you do, and I'm happy to walk through that with you, because that was sort of my baby of what I created, so I'm happy to partner with you to make that happen, Meredith, if you're comfortable being assigned.
Let's do it. I got it.
All right, I love that. Okay.
And Aaron, feel free to assign me to anything you want, Aaron. I'll gladly
That's
pick up on it.
That's on the record, or we got that recorded, just so you
Yeah,
know.
that's right. You got it on the record.
Great, yeah, so Meredith will be assigned to that. So all of those in favor of assigning Meredith Rosenthal that report? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions, spoken. Next is a discussion for the date, location, and topics for board retreat. So it looks like August 12th is the date where the majority of everybody could be available. It will be at the Moncton
Town offices.
it says, not the library, because that'd be crazy. On the 12th, and usually we start right in the morning, sometime around 9. So if you could be a little bit earlier.
Agenda.
Great. So right now, what it looks like is we all come in before 9, we'll do a call to order at 9. We'll hold a public comment, although we don't typically have a lot of public because it's usually warned as just an in-person meeting. Then we'll do a little welcome and an icebreaker. And then the two big topics, well, there are 3 big topics, but really broken up into a few pieces. The first part would be a policy and governance training with someone from the SBA coming in. So that'll be like 2.5 hour block of time. We'll do what we did last year, which is we'll have some lunch, we'll play some games, just give ourselves a big body break. And then from 1 to 2, we'll do work around revising the ends policy, and we'll partner that with the Up for Learning team. And then another 2-hour block will be dedicated to discussing options for responding to financial challenges. So that will be, how do we design future options? What information do we have? How do we put this all together and come up with 3 really bang up ideas? Then we'll adjourn somewhere around 4. Lunch will be taken care of. Afternoon coffee will be taken care of. Any other thoughts about that? Herb?
Yeah, so I think it was the third item that you had, Aaron, in terms of, the budget challenges we're gonna have and that sort of stuff, and spending some time on that. I think that's a great idea. And I'm wondering if within that rubric or the scope of that topic, could be some discussion around. I mean, there's going to be districts and stuff like that, or there might be districts and larger districts, and how do we adapt to that as well? So not just the budgeting aspect of that, but also some of the other pieces that might accompany the budget challenges. Do you think that'll be within the scope of that, Aaron?
I was more envisioning it just us coming up with our three sort of MAUSD options, but I don't think we can do that in a vacuum. I do think we need to pay attention to all those other variables, so I think very well that'll be part of the conversation, depending on what information is available to us in August at that time. But I think whatever information we have to make really informed choices about the future of MAUSD, we should definitely bring to the table.
Yeah, yeah, and who knows whether we'll have those pieces at
Right.
that time, Aaron. But just wanted to, kind of make sure that it might be with if stuff does if relevant stuff does come up, it might be a good time to talk about it.
Yep, I agree. Any other thoughts? Next discussion item is about revising the ends policy. And I don't have a whole lot for you, unfortunately, right now. But I am working with Debbie and Jeannie, who are from VSBA, to come up with a good system in order for us to do that work really thoughtfully. A lot of it involves taking what we've already heard, taking the work we've done with UP to help inform what other information we need to collect in order to revise our ends policies. And then thinking about how do we engage with the community and really our students on that idea. Which is what I'm hoping that UP really brings to the table for us, is how to do that. So there is a process that other boards have used to do this. I think there's only 4 policy and governance boards that I know of. And only one of them or maybe 2 have engaged in this process. So there's not a whole lot of really robust information of how this works in Vermont. It's more like anecdotal, right? Like, this is how we did it, and that seemed to work for us. So I'm doing my best to pull together what that'll look like, and I will share that with you once I have more information about that. But I didn't want to lose sight of this. This is going to be a big project, right? It's a big document. It's the other document, right? So it's a big deal, and it'll not only inform us, but also Patrick and the admin team as they continue to work on the strategic plan. So it's a big thing for us to be engaged in, and that'll be a decent lift. Any thoughts or questions about that?
I had written down a couple of things in one of our finance meetings that I can't locate right now.
Okay.
But I will email them to you, just like thoughts that came up as we were talking about thinking about how we manage our finances and what we prioritize and all that. So I'll make myself an upsetting.
Great, thank you. Okay. We'll move down then to discussion item J, which is about the Vermont education policy efforts.
And I'm happy to start the conversation, but others are very tuned in, certainly Herb, spending a lot of time up here, very tuned into this. So very busy week last week and this week in Montpelier. Possibility that this is the last week, Herb. Fingers crossed, I imagine. It's been a long session already.
I sure hope so. I got a little motorboat I want to put in the water,
Yeah, I imagine. And luckily, the weather hasn't really been drawing you out too much, I'm sure, but the time's coming. So last week, I think the sort of monumental event that happened was the Senate voted to sort of revert back to the House's version of H454, and with the expectation that there would be some amendments to that. And so those amendments so that action happened and an amendment came out, I think late Friday afternoon, early evening. I think sort of deemed the Hardy-Bongartz amendment. Those are two folks that had some differing perspectives on what amendments would make sense to the House version of the bill. And so they were sort of asked to kind of get in a room and kind of figure it out, and they did. And I think that passed out of the Senate and is now with the House, and I think the expectation is that will go to a conference committee where members from the House and members from the Senate will meet to take a look at that, the amendment, basically, and see what sort of compromise they can find. And hopefully get to something they agree on that will go to the governor. I think there's a lot of question about what the governor will do, whether he will sign that or veto that, or I guess potentially allow it to go into law without his signature. So still a lot up in the air, though I think we're getting a little closer to a decision point, and that could happen I think it's expected to happen this week, to be completed from that conference committee. I don't know what the timeline will be for the governor. I don't know how long it'll sit on his desk, but that's sort of a quick overview of where we stand. If you want to fill in some gaps, Herb, then we can get into some of the nitty gritties of what it actually says. We've talked some about it, but we can talk more.
Yeah, I won't get into, a lot of the details. I think the leaders of the Senate and the House are having a little bit of trouble corralling their members around any particular solution. So it'll be an interesting week. I think Patrick's right. Things are trying to wrap up, and we'll see where we go there. Putting on my legislator hat, if anyone has any ideas for me, it's a vote that'll be coming up. So if you have any thoughts, please reach out to me.
Something I will add, sort of an important detail, effectively in every iteration that we've seen of this bill, including this most recent one, a foundation formula of some sort is a key component. So that feels like something that's very likely to happen. Exactly when the timeline is, I think, is part of the conversation. I think in this amendment, I think we're looking at FY 30. So July 1 of 29 would be the first year of the implementation of the new districts. And if there's a class size, which this latest bill has, though the numbers are lowered. So the class size minimums are, I think, 10 for grades K and 1, 12 for 2 through 4 or 5, 15 for 6 through 8, and then 18 for 9 through 12. So it reinstitutes a class size minimum, which the Senate had taken out, but it lowers what that class size minimum was from the original House bill. But in terms of the foundation formula, and every iteration of a foundation formula, money comes out of Addison County, including MAUSD, and goes to other places effectively, right? We're not talking about necessarily increasing the pot of money that is the ed fund for the state, but we are talking about more equitably distributing those funds. And as a county and a district that is in the top 25% of cost per pupil in the state, when there's sort of this balancing of spending, that means those who spend more will be getting less, and those who spend less will be getting more. Now, the flip side is, so we will lose spending ability given the foundation formula, but perhaps our tax rate will be more favorably impacted, which might still be an increase, but maybe less of an increase that it would have been otherwise. I don't want to give the notion that we're going to be reducing taxes here. So that's sort of the trade-off for us. We get to spend less, and our tax rate may be better as a result of that. In other communities, they get to spend more, which can be seen as a benefit and an sort of equalizing, but they'll have a likely increase in their tax rates. And in some articles I've seen, it's as high as a 30% increase. So there's plenty for someone to love and plenty for someone to hate, which maybe is the sign of a perfect bill. I don't know, but that certainly is going to have implications as this rolls forward, locally and statewide.
Yeah, so just jump on with what Patrick was saying. It's going to have, I think that's why we're focusing on how to make adjustments financially. it's going to be quite a hit, I think, to our funding. And one of the things I've been pushing over there is to try to give districts in our situation who are facing a pretty big hit, some flexibility in terms of managing to that new budget reality, and hope to make some progress there. The other thing I just mentioned, I know it's a controversial issue, but there are a bunch of provisions in the bill, both bills now, that would have a tendency to look at smaller schools and say, we should close those. So please give me your feedback on this stuff. I'll probably send out a front porch forum at some point in the near future to get your feedback as well. Those are two very big issues that could really impact our district.
And in years leading up to that, right, so that's a few years out. Obviously, the timeline isn't set in stone right now, but probably 3 or 4 years out before we feel that. In the meantime, there was some activity around the yield bill, and the use of $118 million in one-time funds to buy down the tax rate. So that will impact us as we build FY 27, right? So anything short of 118 million as we build FY 27 that comes from the state is something that has to be made up for in increased taxes or decreased spending from the ed fund. So that will be something that we'll be contending with in addition to sort of the new compensation from the negotiated agreement, likely declining pupil counts. So we'll have a number of things that are starting to look like they're stacking up against us a little bit as we project toward FY 27. So I think to her point before, and to Aaron's point, as we start talking about how do we respond in MAUSD, we have to take into consideration the state context for sure. That's not going to happen until 3 or 4 years from now. We also will still need to figure out what's the bridge between where we are and where we think we're going to land as a state with whatever little or however much we might have for information about that. So kind of a precarious situation for us to be in, but it is our reality.
Can I ask a question clarifying the foundation formula? Probably should know this by now, but is it an obligation to spend that amount for the district, right? So you can't spend less, you can't spend more, like every district across the state is gonna say you have this many pupils and this is the money your district needs to spend essentially?
It is the money you will be sort of issued from the state. There's some conversation about an additional amount of money that you could pursue. I think there are a lot of questions around the legality of that, the ethics of that, et cetera. So we'll see where that lands, but that would have a cap to it. There'd be additional taxation on top of that. We would need a vote of the electorate to approve spending above the foundation formula.
Yes, but kind of was my question. Would we not need an electric, like a budget vote for
No.
just the foundation anymore?
No.
It's just not even to assign how we would spend that? Like,
I think informational sessions about how you'd spend it. I don't think a vote, unless Herb's heard otherwise, but it would be, this is the amount of money you get. Do with it as you see fit. Make it go as far as you can or want, without a vote of the electorate.
that's useful.
Yeah, and that's pretty controversial in itself over there. People have been accustomed to voting on their budget every year. So that'll be huge, huge change, Mike. It's a short week, but there's a lot of controversy around a lot of these concepts. I kind of like the foundation formula in theory, but how it plays out in the details, I think are really important. And if we don't get it right, I think our district is gonna be in a mill hole.
Does the foundation formula include facilities work? Is that,
So there's a lot of talk about the need to have a capital fund for the state and not a lot of clarity on how to create the funds to populate it. One of the things that I've seen in several iterations of this bill that tied to it with a lot of uncertainty still is around this additional funding that districts can pursue. That there's some taxation that comes along with that, and if unused funds in some way can help populate a school construction fund, so but no idea how much it'll actually generate, and given the relative need in the state for our facilities, how far it'll actually go. There has been some talk about, if a project is approved by the state, once this fund actually has money in it, that there'll be a 20% contribution from the state for, as sort of like the foundation. And if a project meets certain other requirements that have to do with creating scale or consolidation, there's potential for an additional 20% to help fund some of those kinds of projects. But there's very loose language right now around what that would look like, other than there'd be a body to oversee it, and some of the conditions under which things might be approved. But the biggest hole is, where's the money coming from?
And so taxpayers, property taxes are still gonna go to the state to fund in amongst other funds, the foundation.
So right now, the way it works is local communities vote in a budget, and the state is then required to fund those approved budgets with the ed fund, which means they have to generate, the tax rate will be what the tax rate needs to be, or the yield will be what the yield needs to be, in order to generate enough taxes to cover those approved budgets. This sort of reverses that. So now it will be the state will determine how much money school districts will get, effectively determining how much ed fund will be created, instead of local communities determining how much ed fund will be created. But it will still come from taxpayers to the state and then distributed out from the state.
Okay, yeah.
There's some of this bill talks about different taxation, and when we're talking about bigger districts and what happens with the grand list value in those different districts and what's the impact on tax rates there. So there's a lot of taxing implications built into this, but hard to really project any implications at this point because of some really big yet to be determined factors like district boundaries and other such things.
Thanks.
It's too much.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
I
You
get the
know,
sense, I
and
get the
it's-
sense that it's like we're fighting equity with what we are assuming is equity. And I can't fully get on board with the fact that we're making any meaningful change.
Yeah.
Except for, saying we've moved money from this area to this area, and I'm really bothered by that.
Yeah.
Only because if we're gonna take all this time and put so much impetus on making this change, why not change it?
Yeah.
Like actually change it, I don't know. I feel
Yeah,
very.
so, I share that frustration there. My guiding principle is this gonna help education in our district or not? So I'm still adding up the the credits and the debits, and that's why I'm reaching out to people to see what they think about that.
And I get the sense from other local board chairs that they have that same frustration of. We're all gonna get hit pretty hard, and some of us really can't afford to take that hit to give it to other people, and so how do we? Is this improving outcomes for students or
Right.
helping those kiddos who are already marginalized in ways?
All
Yeah.
our taxes continue to go up.
Right, right, so the problem doesn't seem to be being solved in the way I think it might.
As it stands now, it certainly creates added pressures in communities to make decisions to react to it. But it stops short of actually doing anything. Like, it still leaves the figure it out part to local communities. And that might be, thinking about the communities that are on the low end of spending per pupil. They're gonna have to figure out the tax rate implications,
Yeah.
because they're gonna see what will feel like a spike in their tax rate, and that's their figure it out. We're on the other end of that spectrum. Our figure it out is figure out how to do it with a couple $1 million less than you have in the year prior to this taking effect, unless there's some sort of a off ramp, as Herb was talking about, that sort of eases us into this new funding formula. So there's sort of there are three camps. I'm sure there are districts that are kind of neutral in terms of how they'll be impacted by the legislation. You're gonna have some where taxes go down and some where taxes go up. So yeah, it's going to be hard to get to a place that feels more equitable without some of the pain and suffering that are likely to be experienced on our way there.
I have another question. So the framework for this whole grand scheme, is this brand new, or are there other states out there that are using a similar framework? And what's going on? What are the results and how are they faring?
A foundation formula approach is probably the most common approach in the country for funding education. How the revenue is generated, there's a lot of variability, but the idea of a foundation formula is pretty common.
And we used to have we had a foundation formula, you know, back in the late 90s, got askew because people were taxing the towns that were wealthier were taxing themselves more in addition to the foundation formula, which was set at a very low rate. And so the court said, geez, that's not fair at all, and it violates our Constitution. Some of those still dynamics are going to be played out here because there's a 10%, there's an ability for some towns, probably with a little more wealth, to tax themselves 10% more to cover the budget hit they're going to have. Whereas a town that, you know, doesn't feel comfortable raising more taxes, asking for more taxes from their voters, are gonna feel the program and personnel hit. So, you know, that's that's a problem in itself.
And I guess that was the problem they were trying to solve, right? And so if there's no language protecting against that from happening, then what problem are they solving?
Yeah.
Because it's still gonna be inequitable.
What I have heard in response to that very statement is something along the lines of, it's better than what we're doing right now.
Yeah, I hear you, Patrick. I understand.
I will say the one thing I appreciate about the foundation formula in the version of the bill that exists right now, and it has been different, is it's based on the current reality of the cost of education. It's not based on a future state where if we created scale, it would cost this much, and therefore we're going to set the foundation formula based on that. You know, that would be a misstep, right? To basically shortchange the education system to create pressure to sort of conform to this notion of scale and this projected desired future state that isn't yet a reality.
Well, and I got one word for that, COVID.
Right.
I mean, how can you, nobody predicted that happening.
Right.
So I think, yeah. I think that's a dangerous slope to play on.
Yeah, but there were a couple of other versions of the bill, at least, that were assuming a future, more efficient state that we don't exist in.
Last one that I should know, is this per pupil or per equalized pupil? Like,
It's per, so there's a foundation formula that's per pupil. And then there are various weights that would be tacked onto that. There are small school weights, there are sparsity weights, there are weights for students on IEPs, which is another controversial piece. The way it's structured right now is effectively the more disabilities a student has, the more funding that they're available for, which sort of incentivizing that isn't a great practice. So I'm concerned about that. There are weights for students that, you know, meet a certain poverty criteria. There are weights for students that are English language learners. So not unlike what our current structure is, but the weighting is a little different than it is now. But the fact that there are weights for those things is similar to what we do right now. And so those weights come with additional funds. On top of that, 15,033 or something like that, I think is the current formula.
okay, so there'd be sort of a fixed cost per student that we would know, this is the number of students across Vermont, and this is the ed fund that needs to meet that. And then a variable fund that would need to be raised on top of that to meet the weighting needs essentially.
Yeah.
So there would be a little bit of variability year to year based on that part, and of course, what they set the foundation.
Right, and then that becomes what they're terming the education opportunity payment, I think is the new term.
Okay.
Herb?
Yeah, they call things delightfully, they have wonderful names for things.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you, Patrick.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, more to come.
And this is true a few hours ago. It might not even be true right now.
Exactly.
Let alone tomorrow or Friday.
We'll keep this topic going. As long as we need to.
It is most likely the session will be done next time we meet, so then we can talk about where the session ended at least.
But,
Sorry.
but then there are veto threats and stuff like that, so, who knows?
All right. We'll move on then to item K, which is an update from finance and facilities.
Yeah, great news here. We solved all of that. So I know we just had a big conversation about it. It's actually, it's really actually all done. No, we did actually have a very nice conversation for what it's worth. We had two kind of primary topics. We continue to be really focused on sort of developing a long-term capital improvements plan that incorporates both kind of what the district had already and the Truex Collins and sort of merging that. And Floyd's been hard at work and actually sent us a draft of a merge of that. So we keep working towards that. That sort of led to a more immediate conversation where it appears that there's a chunk of money still in the current budget that we might be able to allocate to capital projects that might be really useful. So we heard a wonderful presentation from the Mountain principal, Shannon, and she outlined a couple of possibilities that they were considering. So we had a really nice discussion about renovations to science classrooms, and then also to a sort of health and wellness sort of fitness center. And so she outlined some real benefits curricularly to pursuing each of those, knowing that there's probably not enough sort of surplus money right now to complete all of that work, but that they presented as a really important opportunity to provide spaces for our students. So that was a really nice conversation. Again, it was sort of more informational than anything like that, but it gave us as that committee some chance to ask some questions and to push forward about how we prioritize those projects perhaps over others, how do they fit into the overall capital improvement plan? And I think it helped us basically, I think, move forward on some immediate needs, but also think about how do we continue to refine the overall capital improvement plan so that we can account for these sort of opportunities, but also the sort of necessities that have been outlined in the Truex Collins report and other ones. So that was the majority, I would say, of our meeting. And then we used the last little bit, if you will, to start our discussion about sort of long-term district options. Some of the conversations that we've been having long-term, and really just start brainstorming and dusting off some of the ideas that were really brought up in the 2020 kind of feasibility study, amongst others. And we'll continue to have those conversations and maybe even expand those with an idea of trying to perhaps at least have some early conversations with some of the other districts in Addison County, and Hannaford Career Center, to kind of get a sense of some of the challenges that they're facing, so that when we start generating ideas for MAUSD, we can do that with at least some shared understanding of what some of our neighboring districts are thinking and some of the challenges that they face, so that we don't necessarily duplicate those efforts, and so that we might also be able to lean in where opportunities present themselves. So it's saying a lot without saying anything, so sorry for that. If you really know the details, Melissa creates the best minutes. So for anyone on the board or listening, they're really detailed, and that tells you exactly what happened in that meeting. So that's what we did.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Great, we'll move down then to policy and governance.
You
got it.
Oh, man, yeah, we've just been working through our spreadsheet. We have what, 3 to 5 policies to be approved probably for next meeting.
Yep.
And we've been documenting the changes on the spreadsheet for you guys. Doing, and then got the chess. It's the last email from yes.
Yeah, there's a few that are gonna be coming up in July for change. There's one around the library that'll be coming up. There was one around keep wanting to use my terms, but that's not it. It also has to be not Title IX. What was the what was the title?
Yeah.
Oh,
Actually, I think it is.
oh, Title IX. Okay.
Yeah, I was looking for that.
And then the library is the media
Yep.
selection.
Yeah. Keep wanting to use my other, anyway, moving on. But so there will be a few big ones that are coming up for revision, on top of just little ones that are always popping up as revised. We'll also continue to talk about 2.1 for what we want to implement for that. One big thing to note is the procedure for the nutrition is put in, which was something we were waiting on because that was a huge policy rewrite, which has a ton of procedural stuff baked into it. So you should probably be informed about that because there might be like newer, interesting things that come to the board that you're, where does this fit in? And it's all under nutrition, just really tangential things like wellness as a holistic thing rather than just food. So
Probably the most complex policy this board has.
really, truly huge document. I think it's like 3 pages long, just the policy. And it really dictates like who has to be on a team for each part of the procedure, and that takes a long time to put together.
And the procedure for the multilingual learners, this is the loud plan it's called, yeah, that was submitted, so. That's looking quite tight now, so. Good work,
Lots of new stuff in there. Sorry, yeah.
No, that's perfect.
team effort.
All right, and then Meredith, do you want to do community engagement update?
Sure. We are really excited that our spring event is tomorrow in the Mount Abe cafeteria from 7 to 8 p.m. We hope that all of you will join us there. So that's been our main focus, is planning for that. We've worked with Up for Learning to essentially unveil Portrait of a Learner to the community, as well as get community buy-in for how we as a community can support everything that our students have outlined in the Portrait of a Learner document. And that's essentially it.
Great.
Please come tomorrow. There's nothing I would hate more than to have an empty cafeteria, so please be there.
I was being nosy to see if any other community members joined our committee meetings, and I just noticed on these minutes that the committee member that's in attendance and absent and all that is blank, so it just think it'd be important to document in our minutes who's present.
On the committee agendas?
Yeah, well, in the
minutes.
notes, in the minutes, it doesn't say who attended the meeting.
For all of the
Community
committees.
engagement.
Oh, do you have community that come to your meetings?
But even the board member or the committee member aren't. So
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they should, yeah.
Thanks for the heads
So I
up,
guess-
Melissa. I'll make sure that gets documented at our next meeting.
it was because I was looking to see
Yeah,
if community
that's
went, and
fair.
then I noticed it was missing, and I wanted to mention it. That way the minutes are just complete when we post them.
Sometimes Jennifer catches that too before she posts it. She'll notice that and just ask you to verify, but yeah. Good note. Guys. Public comment. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, I have a clarifying question, and I don't know if that's something I can do in this format. I'll put it out there and you guys can let me know. I heard you talking about the budget surplus and capital improvement projects. Is someone willing to restate the amount of the budget surplus?
It's documented in the finance and facility minutes. The estimate as of the meeting date, which was on May 13th, Sarah, sorry, I'm just trying to find it.
Yeah, I took a quick look. I couldn't find it immediately, but I probably didn't look hard enough.
I thought I put it in there, but I did put a lot of words. I'm sorry.
Ah, it's okay. Let's see.
Lloyd, you know what I'm looking for?
We're anticipating somewhere between $750 and $1 million.
Okay, thank you.
Any other public comment?
Okay.
Okay. So we'll do our board eval. Yeah. So Sarah, you were on for today. You feeling like you wanna? Yeah, let's tackle that.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. We know the date is the 27th. To me. I think the level of engagement of all board members that were present was high. With robust conversation, followed the agenda. That was, yes.
I mean, we're 25 minutes early, so,
We're a little bit,
so I'm not sure.
yeah. Keep going, sir.
Absolutely, the chair, established the agenda materials for distribution to the board, yes. Yes, to the number 6, I think.
Number 6.
Pardon me?
What is number 6?
Is the chair effective in fostering a professional culture regarding fair and open deliberation, full participation of all members, and ensuring the integrity of the board process?
Yes.
Yeah, all right.
No, any other feedback for the chair? I don't have any, and what went well with the meeting? I really like when they're under 3 hours, and I don't really have any ideas about how to improve future meetings, so, anybody else?
The monitoring reports are really clear. I think it
Yeah.
made our life a lot easier, like it was.
Yeah, I
There's
agree.
just really good evidence, it's really well presented, and so it just meant for, I don't know, easy discussion and acceptance, with a sense of like, oh, we've done that important job, so thanks to those who put
Yeah.
those together, I think.
I noticed that.
The work that you put in there makes this go much quicker, but also makes the process feel like it's meaningful, so thanks.
And I just want you all to know that there are other boards looking to our board about possibly doing policy and governance and how we operate, so. The better we do, the better example we give to other boards. Kudos, okay, motion to adjourn at 7:55. So moved. Kristen first,
Second.
Barb second. All those in favor of adjourning at 7:55, please say aye. Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Abstentions, okay.